Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now, the Prophet ﷺ had to deal with different fronts. And as we mentioned before the break, there was the front of, which is the biggest front, how to teach the Muslims to be proper Muslims. How to teach them the Quran that was being revealed to him. How to teach them how to behave and to solve the problems among them when it comes. There was the other front of the polytheists in Medina itself, the different tribes around Medina, and what to do with them, because they were living in a hostile area, hostile environment. They're all idol worshippers, and they follow, in essence, Quraysh in Mecca, which is considered to be their leader in pilgrimage and also in all different things. He had also the front of the hypocrites, who were trying their level best to undermine Islam, and they're anticipating the right moment where they can attack. And also, he had to deal with the front of the Jews. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he came to Medina, there were three prominent and major tribes of the Jews. There was Banu Qaynuqa', there was Banu An-Nadir, and also there was Banu Qurayza. And Banu means the son. So when you say Banu Israel, the sons of Israel. And Israel is Jacob, peace and blessing be upon him. He has another name, so his name is Jacob or Israel. So the Prophet ﷺ had to deal with the Jews. And the Jews, by nature, they are financially strong. When they settled in Medina, they had to, or they did not have to, but this was their line of work. They dealt in usury, or what is known as riba. And riba is one of the major sins in Islam. It's forbidden for a Muslim to borrow with interest or to lend people with interest. And it is one of the major sins in our religion. Yet it's the normal practice of Jews. And that is why the majority of the financial institutions nowadays deal in usury, in riba. They call it interest, they call it whatever they want to call it, but it is forbidden in Islam. It's a major sin. And they had their way in doing so, because dealing in usury means that you get richer and everyone else gets poorer. There is no risk, none whatsoever, on the person lending, because he's always guaranteeing that he will receive what he lent with interest. And people are losing.
It's a form of oppression, isn't it?
It is, but it is with your consent.
Yeah.
So this is, it's like putting the poison in the sweets and giving it to someone. He dies in a sweet way, but he's dying at the end of the day. They had their way in controlling people. So they used to go to the different rival tribes, and they would lend the head of the tribes money against their farms and lands and property. And they would go to the other rival tribes and do the same. And they had their expertise in firing the feuds among tribes. So, at the end of the day, they sat back, they watched the tribes fighting and killing each other, and utilizing the money they've lent them, and at the end of the day, they ended up by taking away their properties, farms, and lands, because they could not pay the debt. And almost it's similar to what's happening nowadays when countries sell in huge amounts of arm deals to the third world countries. They feud the battles and wars and conflicts, and then they rest assured that everything is going back to them one way or the other.
I read that time they used to sell weapons as well, like swords and stuff like this. So is it correct that they were traders for the weapons?
They were facilitators. They would do lots of things. Anything that would generate money, they would be involved in. Prostitution, intoxicants, and it's the same thing. Because they had an objective, and they had to reach this. So, by any means they needed to reach there, this is acceptable to them. In Islam, it's a different story. The means have to be proper and acceptable by Islam. You cannot gain money, you cannot reach your objective by crooked ways.
Man hasn't really changed in the sense of how the nature of, you could say, non-believers towards Islam in the olden days until the present era. It's kind of like very similar behavior of human beings.
Well, it's different from time to time, but the essence is the same. Now, we have to remember that the Jews themselves came to Medina because it was mentioned in their Old Testament that there would be a messenger coming from Faran, a city between mountains. And they knew themselves, they were anticipating the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. So they used to threaten the people of Medina, the Arabs, the Ansar, Al-Aus and the Khazraj, the tribe of Aus and Khazraj. Whenever they attacked them, the Jews would threaten them by saying that it's time for a prophet that would come and we will fight you under his sword. So we will show you. Just wait, it's a matter of days or years. They knew that there was a messenger coming. Yet when he came out, and he was not from the sons of Israel, he was not a Jew, they did not accept this. So it's human nature. In every time and era, in every time and place, you will find someone who comes and feuds problems, who thrives on people killing each other, and who makes money on the side. This is human nature. Islam comes to purify this, to plan and to organize how people deal with each other. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ at the very beginning had to set the foundation of the Islamic country. He set the rules and regulations, how Muslims treat each other, how Muslims treat the non-Muslims. And it was obvious that the Prophet ﷺ did not come to rule and conquer, did not come to confiscate property and wealth. And that is why he gave the Jews the freedom to worship. He could have easily come and said, well, you either revert to Islam or we're going to chop your heads off. Or he could have done something that is even better. He could have annihilated them altogether and took their money and wealth and property. And no one would question him. Yet, he gave them the freedom of religion, to worship in any way they want, because we do not force people to accept Islam. And this was manifested in India, where Muslims ruled over 8 centuries, and it was manifested in Spain, where Muslims almost ruled the same era. No one was forced to revert to Islam. We did not have any, I don't know if the word is right, inquisitions, where you force people like they did, the Crusaders did with the Muslims, and they had these great courts of inspecting the religion and killing and torturing if you do not come back to what they believe. They didn't have any of the source. The Jews were trying to dominate, and they did dominate Medina with their financial abilities, with their loans, and with their political hidden agendas. They used to manipulate the leaders of the tribes. When the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, the first thing he did was to spread justice and fairness among all. Now, he came to plant love and brotherhood in those who were fighting together. some of the tribes had a 100-year-old wars erupting from time to time. 100 years they've been fighting and killing each other. When the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, he immediately, by spreading Islam, had these fighting brothers or tribes becoming real blood brothers.
But I know he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came to do this. But would you say, as human beings, these men were having that ability to get rid of these ill feelings from, like we see, like present-day Palestine and the oppression of Muslims? Is it that very easy someone can come along and just say, be brothers now?
Well, if you have a belief, I can say that you can. Because whenever there's a will, there's a way. But the problem is that if you are not on the same pace, if people have hidden agendas, you cannot have this. But if they all believe in Islam,
empty out their grudges, and
if they follow the Quran and the Sunnah, then their intentions, their desires are transformed into what the Quran and the Sunnah desire. And that is why in a hadith, the Prophet says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you will not become a believer until what you desires follows what I have come with. So a person would not become a real believer, a real mu'min, until his desire complies with the Quran and also with the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So was it like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did it, but does it mean that he needed that the Muslims themselves, they had to cooperate and help him by coming back to each other, or like he could do it by himself even if the people themselves didn't want to?
The Prophet ﷺ did not have a magic wand, in the sense that he could not just point at them and they would become brothers. If the person himself does not want to advance, you could not advance him. You could lead a horse to water, but you cannot force the horse to drink from it. I'm afraid that this is all the time we have for today's program. So inshallah, until we meet next time, fi amalillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Mm-hmm.